Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are starting a fresh and detailed journey into the history of the Washington Quarter Dollar, one of the most iconic and longest-running coin series in United States numismatic history, a coin that almost every American has held in their hand, yet very few truly understand. Because the Washington Quarter was never meant to be a permanent design when it was first introduced in 1932, but rather a one-year commemorative issue created to honor the 200th birthday of George Washington, the first president of the United States and a symbol of American independence, leadership, and national identity. And to understand why this coin matters so much, we have to step back into the early 1930s, a time when the United States was suffering through the Great Depression, unemployment was widespread, banks were failing, and public morale was extremely low. And during this difficult period, the U.S. government believed that honoring George Washington on a circulating coin would inspire unity, patriotism, and stability, which is why a national design competition was announced to select the new quarter dollar design, replacing the standing Liberty quarter that had been in circulation since 1916, and that competition attracted some of the most talented sculptors and artists of the era, but it was John Flanagan, a New York-based sculptor, whose design was ultimately selected, even though his work was not the favorite of the Fine Arts Commission. Because political influence and practical considerations played a major role in the final decision, and Flanagan obverse design featured a left-facing portrait of George Washington based loosely on the famous bust by Jean-Antoine Houdon, a likeness that had long been considered one of the most accurate representations of Washington, while the reverse showcased a proud heraldic eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, symbolizing both military strength and peace, a powerful message during uncertain times. And when the Washington Quarter was officially released into circulation in August 1932, it was struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, giving it intrinsic metal value as well as historical significance, and the public response was overwhelmingly positive, with Americans quickly embracing the coin as a fitting tribute to their first president, which led to an unexpected outcome, because instead of returning to the standing Liberty design after 1932, the U.S. Mint decided to keep the Washington Quarter as the permanent quarter dollar design starting in 1934, effectively ending the Standing Liberty series, and this decision marked the beginning of a coin series that would last for decades and eventually evolve into one of the most collected and studied U.S. coins of all time. And early Washington quarters from the 1930s are especially important to collectors today because they were produced during a period of economic hardship, resulting in lower mintages at certain mints such as Denver and San Francisco, and coins from these years often show weak strikes, especially on the eagle's chest and Washington's hair details, making fully struck examples much scarcer than their mintage numbers might suggest. And beyond mintage figures, the historical context of these early issues adds another layer of fascination, because these coins circulated during some of the most critical moments in American history, including the New Deal era, World War II, and the post-war economic boom, silently witnessing decades of change while remaining a constant part of everyday commerce. And even from an artistic standpoint, the Washington Quarter reflects shifting attitudes toward coin design, moving away from the more complex and symbolic designs of the early 20th century toward a cleaner, more formal presidential portrait that emphasized dignity and authority. And as this series continued to grow year after year, mint by mint, it laid the foundation for a collecting tradition that would later explode with the introduction of folders, albums, and eventually large-scale commemorative programs, making the Washington Quarter not just a coin, but a gateway into American numismatics for millions of collectors around the world. As the Washington Quarter continued its journey beyond its early commemorative origins, the series entered what collectors now call the Classic Silver Era, a long and historically rich period that stretched from 1934 through 1964, during which the coin became deeply embedded in American daily life while simultaneously evolving into a mirror of the nation's economic strength, wartime sacrifice, and post-war prosperity, because throughout these decades the quarter dollar was struck in 90% silver, giving it real intrinsic value and ensuring that it was respected not just as small change but as a tangible store of wealth. And during the 1930s and early 1940s, production numbers fluctuated significantly due to economic pressures, government policies, and shifting demand for coinage, with certain dates and mint marks emerging as challenging finds even today, especially when condition is taken into account, as many Washington quarters from this era were heavily circulated and often struck with weak details, particularly on Washington's hair above the ear and the eagle's breast feathers on the reverse, making sharply struck examples far more elusive than casual collectors might expect. And as the United States entered World War II, the Washington Quarter took on an even deeper symbolic role, circulating alongside ration books, war bonds, and patriotic propaganda, while the silver within the coin underscored the nation's industrial and financial commitment to the war effort. And during these years, the U.S. Mint operated at full capacity, especially at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, producing massive quantities of quarters to support a rapidly expanding wartime economy. Yet despite high mintages, coins from the early 1940s often show hurried production quality, leading to numerous varieties, die cracks, and subtle doubling that have since become points of interest for advanced collectors. And after the war, the late 1940s and 1950s brought a period of relative stability and economic growth, reflected in more consistent mintages and improved strike quality. Although even in this era there are standout issues, such as certain low-mintage San Francisco releases and coins that exhibit particularly strong or weak strikes, which can dramatically affect value. And as American households prospered, the Washington quarter became one of the most commonly used coins in everyday transactions, paying for everything from newspapers and bus fares to parking meters and jukebox plays, embedding itself into the rhythm of daily life. And yet beneath this familiarity was a growing tension, because the rising price of silver throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s began to challenge the practicality of using precious metal in circulating coinage, leading to hoarding, melting, and a gradual disappearance of silver coins from circulation as people realized their bullion value exceeded face value. And this economic pressure reached a breaking point in 1964, the final year of silver Washington quarter production, making 1964 quarters historically significant as the end of an era, because they represent the last time Americans could routinely receive a silver quarter in everyday change, and the sheer number of 1,964 quarters struck, particularly at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, reflects the government's urgent attempt to meet demand before transitioning to a new composition. Yet despite these massive mintages, high-grade examples with strong strikes and clean surfaces remain desirable, especially when professionally graded. And looking back at the silver era as a whole, the Washington quarter stands as a chronicle of mid-20th century America, capturing decades of hardship, resilience, global conflict, and prosperity in a single, consistent design that remained largely unchanged while the world around it transformed. And this continuity is precisely what makes the series so compelling to collectors, because each date and mint mark represents not just a coin, but a specific moment in American history, frozen in silver and carried through countless hands before finding its way into collections where its story can finally be fully appreciated. As the story of the Washington quarter moves into its modern phase, the year 1965 stands as one of the most dramatic turning points not only for this coin but for United States coinage as a whole, because it was in this year that the U.S. Mint made the historic decision to remove silver from circulating coinage, fundamentally changing the composition, purpose, and perception of the quarter dollar. And this shift did not happen suddenly or without resistance, as rising silver prices, hoarding by the public, and a nationwide coin shortage forced lawmakers to confront the reality that precious metal coinage was no longer sustainable for everyday use, leading to the Coinage Act of 1965, which officially replaced the 90% silver Washington quarter with a copper-nickel-clad version featuring an outer layer of copper-nickel bonded to a pure copper core. And although the design of the coin remained visually similar, the change in weight, sound, and intrinsic value marked the beginning of a completely new era. And for many Americans at the time this transition was emotional, because the silver quarter had been a familiar and trusted part of daily life for generations, and its disappearance symbolized a broader economic shift away from metal-backed money toward fiat currency, and the mint attempted to ease this transition by freezing coin dates at 1964 for several years, meaning that quarters dated 1965, 1966, and 1967 were intentionally undated or shared the same design to discourage hoarding, a policy that today makes early-clad quarters historically fascinating, as they reflect the government's struggle to manage public confidence in money. And once regular dating resumed in 1968, along with the reintroduction of mint marks, the Washington quarter settled into its role as a workhorse coin of modern America, produced in enormous quantities at the Philadelphia and Denver mints to meet the demands of a rapidly growing economy. And during the 1970s and 1980s, these clad quarters became so common that few people thought of them as collectible. Yet within this period there are still important issues and varieties, including double dies, off-center strikes, and transitional errors that occurred as minting technology evolved. And from a broader historical perspective, the clad Washington quarter witnessed profound social and economic changes, circulating during the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the inflationary 1970s, and the technological boom of the late 20th century, all while maintaining the same basic design introduced decades earlier. And this remarkable continuity created a strong emotional connection between the coin and the public, as multiple generations grew up using the same portrait of George Washington, making the quarter one of the most recognizable coins in the world. And yet by the late 1990s, the U.S. Mint began to realize that the Washington quarter could serve a new purpose beyond commerce, transforming it into an educational and commemorative tool that could spark renewed interest in coin collecting, leading directly to one of the most successful numismatic programs in history. And this decision would once again redefine the Washington Quarter's place in American culture, proving that even a familiar design could be reinvented to tell new stories while still honoring its historic roots. With the foundation of the modern clad era firmly in place, the Washington Quarter entered a revolutionary chapter with the launch of the 50-state quarters program in 1999, a program that completely transformed how the public viewed the quarter dollar and reintroduced millions of people to the excitement of coin collecting, because for the first time in generations, Americans actively searched their pocket change for new designs, turning everyday transactions into a nationwide treasure hunt. And the idea behind the program was both simple and brilliant, as each of the 50 states would be honored with a unique reverse design released in the order they ratified the Constitution, while the familiar obverse portrait of George Washington was retained to maintain continuity, and this balance between tradition and innovation proved to be extraordinarily successful, as families, students, and casual collectors began filling folders and albums, often learning state history, geography, and symbolism along the way. And from 1999 through 2008, 5 new state designs were released each year, resulting in massive mintages that ensured widespread circulation. Yet despite these high numbers, certain issues stand out today due to lower-than-expected survival in high grades, especially from years when production quality suffered or when coins were heavily used in circulation. And collectors quickly discovered that condition mattered just as much as design, with uncirculated and proof examples commanding premiums, particularly those with strong strikes and clean surfaces. And beyond the standard issues, the program also introduced special collector versions, including proof quarters struck at the San Francisco Mint and silver proof versions containing 90% silver, which paid homage to the original composition of the Washington Quarter and appealed to more advanced collectors. And the success of the state quarters program reshaped the U.S. Mint's approach to circulating coinage, demonstrating that coins could serve as powerful storytelling tools that connect people to their shared heritage. And this realization led directly to the continuation of themed quarter programs, such as the District of Columbia and U.S. Territories quarters released in 2009, which expanded the scope of representation and highlighted regions often overlooked in national narratives. And as these programs progressed, the Washington Quarter evolved from a simple medium of exchange into a canvas for cultural expression, reflecting landmarks, wildlife, historical events, and influential figures, all while circulating in everyday commerce. And numismatically, this era produced a wide range of varieties and errors, including double dies, die chips, and striking anomalies that occurred due to the enormous production volumes required to meet public demand, making roll searching and error hunting especially popular among modern collectors. And perhaps most importantly, the state quarters era fundamentally changed public perception of coins, proving that even in a digital age, physical money could still inspire curiosity, learning, and a sense of connection. And by the time the program concluded, the Washington Quarter had firmly established itself not just as a relic of the past, but as a dynamic and adaptable symbol of American history, capable of evolving with the times while remaining rooted in its original purpose of honoring the nation's first president. As the Washington Quarter moved beyond the state quarters era, it entered another ambitious phase that further expanded its role as a storyteller of American heritage, beginning with the America the Beautiful Quarters program in 2010, which shifted the focus from states and territories to national parks and historic sites, once again using the quarter dollar as a circulating museum of American natural beauty and cultural landmarks. And this program reinforced the idea that the Washington Quarter was no longer just a utilitarian coin but a living archive of national memory, as each reverse design highlighted a different site chosen for its environmental, historical, or cultural importance, ranging from iconic landscapes like Yosemite and the Grand Canyon to lesser-known but deeply meaningful locations such as national monuments, battlefields, and protected ecosystems. And while the obverse still featured George Washington, it was subtly modified in 2010 to more closely resemble John Flanagan original sculptural intent, marking the first significant obverse change in decades and reminding collectors that even familiar designs can evolve. And from a production standpoint, these quarters were struck in massive numbers at the Philadelphia and Denver mints for circulation, while the San Francisco Mint produced special collector versions, including proof coins and silver issues containing 99.9% silver, a notable departure from the traditional 90% standard, which appealed strongly to modern collectors and investors alike. And as the program continued through 2021, it produced an extraordinary variety of designs that captured public imagination and encouraged educational use in classrooms and homes. Yet despite high mintages, the quality of strikes varied widely from year to year, creating challenges for collectors seeking top-grade examples, particularly because modern circulation quarters often suffer from contact marks and weak strikes due to High-speed production, making coins graded MS-67 and above surprisingly scarce and valuable, and alongside standard issues, this era also produced a wide range of collectible errors and varieties, including double dies, die clashes, grease-filled dies, and dramatic off-center strikes, all of which became highly sought after by era collectors who recognized that high-volume programs often produce the most interesting minting anomalies, and beyond collecting mechanics, the Washington Quarter. During this era became a cultural bridge, connecting older generations who remembered silver quarters with younger collectors whose first exposure to coins came through colorful folders and national park themes, reinforcing the idea that numismatics is not just about metal and value but about shared stories and curiosity. And as the America the Beautiful program drew to a close, it was clear that the Washington Quarter had successfully reinvented itself yet again, proving its unique ability to remain relevant across generations, economic systems, and artistic movements, while continuing to honor the foundational ideals represented by George Washington himself. And this adaptability is precisely what has allowed the Washington Quarter to survive and thrive for nearly a century, setting the stage for its most recent transformations and ensuring its continued importance in both circulation and collecting culture. As we reach the concluding chapter of the Washington Quarter's long and remarkable journey, the most recent developments and the coin's future significance bring everything together, because in the early 2020s the Washington Quarter once again evolved to reflect changing cultural priorities and historical awareness, most notably with the introduction of the American Women Quarters program beginning in 2022, a bold initiative that retained George Washington on the obverse while completely reimagining the reverse to honor influential American women who shaped the nation's history, culture, science, and civil rights. And this program marked a historic moment not just for the quarter but for U.S. coinage as a whole, as it expanded representation in circulating money and acknowledged contributions that had long been overlooked, featuring figures such as Maya Angelou, Eleanor Roosevelt, Wilma Mankiller, Anna May Wong, and many others. And once again the quarter became a daily educational tool, sparking conversations about history, equality, and national identity every time someone received one in change. And from a numismatic standpoint, this era has already proven fascinating, as high-speed modern minting continues to produce varieties and errors that collectors eagerly search for, while proof and silver versions struck at the San Francisco Mint preserve these designs in higher quality for long-term appreciation. And looking ahead, the Washington Quarter stands as one of the most resilient coin series in the world, having survived economic collapse, the end of silver coinage, massive inflation, digital payment revolutions, and constant cultural change while still remaining instantly recognizable. And this endurance is precisely why collectors continue to study it so deeply, because no other U.S. coin so clearly reflects the nation's shifting values across nearly a century of uninterrupted production, from the Great Depression to the modern digital age. And when all eras are considered together, the Washington Quarter becomes more than just a coin. It becomes a historical timeline in metal, documenting how America honors its leaders, tells its stories, and adapts its symbols to remain relevant. And for collectors, whether beginners filling folders or advanced numismatists hunting rare varieties and high-grade examples, the Washington Quarter offers endless opportunities to learn, explore, and connect with history, proving that even the most common coin can carry extraordinary meaning when viewed through the lens of time, design, and human experience. And with that understanding, the story of the Washington Quarter Dollar comes to a close, not as an ending, but as an ongoing legacy that will continue to evolve alongside the nation it represents. Thanks for watching.